Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe, your host, and I'm so pleased you're here. And I hope you've had the most wonderful week. Today's guest is Alison Canavan, and she is an acclaimed international speaker, wellness coach, and mindfulness advocate, inspiring audiences worldwide with her powerful message of personal growth and well-being. As a former international model, she has graced the world's most prominent runways and magazines, but it is her journey beyond the spotlight that truly captivates hearts and minds. Alison's life took unexpected turns, leading her through mental health struggles and addictions. These challenges became the catalyst for her remarkable transformation and ultimate purpose to empower others to live life to the fullest. Through her keynotes, workshops, and consulting, she blends teaching and practices like mindfulness, meditation, and breathwork with life-changing mindset tools that encourage personal and professional growth and true organizational transformation. She's the author of the award-winning book, Minding Mum, which is a self-care book for new mums, and runs online workshops, a women's membership called the Ali Code, and personal mentoring and coaching for people seeking true transformation, growth, and healing. So I'm delighted that Alison's on the podcast. I actually met Alison when we were doing a summit earlier in the year. So I'm delighted she's on the podcast. Her story is incredible, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So without further ado, here is the episode with Alison. So welcome, Alison. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you for being here. So, for those people that might not know you, why don't you give a brief introduction and we'll go from there?
Yeah, absolutely. So every time I tell my story, I'm always like, oh gosh, go right back to I mean, it really started when I started modeling at 15, super young. I have a 14-year-old son now, and in a few months he's going to be 15. And I can't even imagine him getting on planes and doing Fashion Week everywhere. Like, it's just so
Yeah.
bizarre when I think back to how everything started for me. But I started modeling at 15. It was absolutely never a childhood dream. I wasn't one of those girls who grew up looking at magazines going, I want to be a model. I was actually a complete tomboy. I actually never really wore makeup, was always in tracksuits, climbed trees as a little girl. And it was my dad's friend that put me in for a competition that I won in Ireland, and that kickstarted that. And then I represented Ireland in the Ford Supermodel of the World competition when I was 16 in Las Vegas. And that really kickstarted everything. I was represented by Ford in Paris then, and I used to go to Paris on all my school holidays. It is an incredible career. You get to travel the world and meet amazing people, but there's also a really dark side to that industry. And being exposed to that at a very young age was intense and a lot. And so I did that for about, God, into my 30s. At the end of my 20s, I started to become really interested in why everybody that was around me was so unhappy. It's something that I had always been very acutely aware of. And the greatest blessing of being in an industry like that from so young is that you learn that the grass is not greener. because you get to be in the company behind the scenes of some of the most famous people in the world. I partied with some of the biggest rock stars and most famous people, and very, very rarely did I ever come across somebody who was so incredibly happy, who loved their life. And I've always been a really deep thinker. I've always been a searcher, a seeker spiritually as well. When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I went to the Buddha Center in London, and I remember seeing a sign that said, understand your mind. And I was like, oh, sign me up. Yes, because it was like my mind was my torture chamber, chronic ruminator, overthinker my whole life. And then I had these parallel lives going. I was always into meditation, which gave me some semblance of peace, but my life was always in these extremist kind of camps. I would go off on silent retreats and take a few days away, and it was almost like torturing myself, and then go back to, say, New York, where I lived, and that would last a couple of days, and then I would be back partying. So I'm sober 10 years. And in the,
Congratulations.
thank you. And in the many, many years running up to that in the industry, I spent about 10 years in and out of the rooms of AA, especially during my time in New York. I always knew I had a problem from when I was super young. A lot of people think that the industry is what caused my addiction. It's absolutely not. I grew up in the era of dance music in Ireland, and we started drinking very, very young in Ireland. Like, my son is so innocent compared to what I was. Like, at his age now, I was in fields and going to discos and robbing alcohol from my house, right? It was very different. And so I would say that my drug and alcohol use started in Dublin with my peers. And then there was a huge club scene, and I used to hang out with lots of DJs. So that's really where my partying started. The industry just made addiction very easy. It was available all the time. And as a young girl, you're invited into nightclubs, and they call them PRs, and everything is given to you for free. Alcohol, drugs, all free. You pay for nothing. And so if you're in any way lost, I always say, going into an industry like that, oof, you're going to find it very hard to have any semblance of balance or stability. And I think when we're young, when we're using any substances, we're bulletproof, or we think we are. And I remember a makeup artist who was in recovery in New York saying to me, because I would turn up hungover, like he would know, because obviously I'd smell of alcohol, my eyes would be bloodshot, I'd probably have had about an hour's sleep. And he would say to me, you're getting away with this now. And he goes, you're actually incredibly blessed, Alison, because you are one of the lucky ones where you're able to turn it on. You look incredible. You can get up there behind the camera and you give it 110%. You really deliver. And I think that was the worst part for me. And that was the reason why I stayed in addiction for so long, because I got away with it. Even though there was a lot behind the scenes falling apart, and internally I was falling apart, and mental health issues were at an all-time high, I was an absolute pro at turning up to work, putting on a mask, putting my best foot forward, and delivering for my clients.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Hindsight, when you look back on that, and I'm thinking about the listener, it's what keeps people stuck, feeling, well, they're not that bad. They're still 100% on it. No one would know that there's any sort of issue going on, because when they get to work, that's it. They can just turn it on and just do what they need to do, fully functioning, haven't really got a problem. And I think it is interesting because, one, it, as you say, it potentially catches up with you, or two, it's what you said about the internal piece, that that sort of mental health perspective. So maybe we could talk a bit more about that side of it, because obviously you recognize that that was potentially an issue.
Well, I always had this kind of melancholy energy from when I was a teenager. I struggled with my mental health. Now at 47, I understand I have ADHD. I have all of these things that were only like came to light actually in the last few years even. And actually most people who have chronic anxiety and depression are misdiagnosed ADHD people, which is really interesting. And so a lot of my behavior in my teens, well, first of all, I went to the doctor and they just medicated me. So that was the answer for everything, was medication from when I was super young. And I also was brought up in a family where doctors were gods. We hand our power over to the experts. And no decision was ever made in our home by our mother. It was like, oh, we're going to go to the doctor. Every decision was outsourced. So when you are reared in an environment, in a society where every major decision is outsourced, especially around having any kind of sovereignty over yourself, you don't trust that you know what's good for you and what's not good for you. And so you're constantly seeking external validation and then people pleasing. And so as soon as I took a drug or a drink and I felt all of that subside temporarily, I was in, hooked. I was like, oh my God, for a few hours, I'm not worrying, I'm not overthinking, I'm not paranoid. All of this just disappears. And so it's amazing that even the come down from drugs or the hangover, it was worth it to offset not being anxious and depressed for a very short space of time. And so that was really for me, is that I look back, like I talk to some friends now who are a couple of weeks into rehab before they realize they have a problem. And I'm going, that's fascinating. I was acutely aware as a very young teenager that I always took it further than everybody. I mean, it bothered me. It bothered me from a very, very early age. I knew that I was the one that had to finish the nagging of vodka if we were out. I always had to go that step further. And I became very proficient at hiding that, actually. At a really early age, not realizing that the alcohol and drugs were going to make my depression and anxiety worse because I had no connection. I went to every mental health doctor and person and psychiatrist and psychologist and therapist, and not one of them ever said to me, how much are you drinking?
Yeah. And that's what always amazes me.
I'm a coach now. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a meditation and breathwork teacher. And I do what I do in the space I do it because I want to help people. And I'm not poo-pooing anybody else's career, but I spent decades in therapy offices with nobody connecting the dots, and also nobody communicating with anybody else who was taking care of me. The person who was prescribing medication was not communicating with the therapist. It's kind of wild when we think about it, how everything is so disjointed and disconnected. And it was like my external world, how I was seeking help, was reflecting my internal world of how disconnected and severed I was from the different aspects of myself. And so, in fairness, I constantly went into different offices, and I thought if I paid the best therapist in New York, who was the most expensive, that then they could fix me. But my attitude and my way of thinking, because I didn't know any other way, was going to different people and literally saying, fix me. And I suppose you could say I was saying, help me too. I wasn't completely asking somebody to do all the work, but I actually genuinely had no idea that how I was living, how I was showing up, I had no idea that I could work with my thoughts. I could work with my own emotions, the kind of relationships I had, the people I was hanging out with, my low self-worth and confidence were contributing to everything like that. That was a big disconnect for me for many years. And I remember even looking around at girls and being in castings, and there would be hundreds of girls sitting in the room, stunningly beautiful, amazing women, and feeling this air of discontent, people who just weren't happy in their body. Like, it's kind of constantly looking at yourself. We used to be measured by the agency, especially during show season. Every single day you would be measured in Paris. Every day. So like, they're getting the tape measure out, they're measuring your weight, they're measuring your hips. So the level of instability and horrific relationships that I saw girls die from starvation, from drugs, all sorts of stuff. The things I saw before there was social media and mobile phones, the things that agencies are responsible for, it's like huge in how these girls were treated. And I remember thinking, it must be food. This is all food. And I went and I studied nutrition and personal training and all of that stuff. And I remember thinking, oh, this is absolutely nothing to do with food. When I started working with people, I was like, I've always been an intuitive, always. And I always used to pick up things in people's fields. And I've always been a seer, spiritual. I used to see my grandmother. So I've always been deeply, deeply connected to the spiritual realm, but terrified of it. My aunt and my mom had me exercised when I was in my teens, for example, because I was seeing my grandmother. So that'll tell you the level of shutdown. I'm also from Catholic Ireland. And so now I know they're my gifts and my power. When I work with people, I pick up lots of different things. You know what I mean? That's actually my gift. And so it was really interesting. And I always look at addiction because I work with so many people. A lot of very highly sensitive, empathic people end up as addicts because it's a lot to be sensitive in today's world. And if you don't know how to manage your energy and you don't understand empathy and being an empath and being a sensitive, leaning into addiction can be very helpful, actually, because I'm always like, every behavior is meeting a need. We have to remember that. Everything is meeting a need. So when we can understand what need is being met and heal it in a different way. So I remember I really wanted to stop drinking. For me, the drugs only came through alcohol. Does that make sense? Like I would never have picked up a drug if alcohol hadn't come first. And the drugs really came so I could drink more. That's why I took drugs, so I could stay up drinking longer because I never wanted the party to end. And I just remember sitting in AA and I could never imagine living a life without alcohol because every single thing in my reality was associated with alcohol. So there was this fear of, well, if I let go of alcohol, I won't be able to enjoy a christening, a wedding, a birthday, a lunch, a dinner, like anything ever again. I'm from Ireland. We associate drinking with everything, absolutely everything. And I didn't know anyone who didn't drink. Isn't that really interesting?
Yeah.
I actually know one person that didn't drink. Now, it's so interesting. I live a life where none of the parents I hang out with, none of my friends, nobody drinks. They have never had a problem like I have. It's just that your vibration attracts in your reality. So I'm not around drinkers. Just because I'm not holding that frequency. And I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people in the world actually who don't live like that. It's interesting, you know?
Yeah.
I remember saying to my sister, I could write a book on stupid things I used to say for a very, very, very long time. Like, but everybody I know does drugs, but everybody I know does this, as if that makes it okay. And I remember I was getting healthy. I was meditating all the time, but every night that I went out was still at 5 or 6 o'clock, even if it was just Friday to Saturday. And I tried to moderate my drinking for years, which was a full-time job. I would spend the whole week thinking about how I'm going to moderate my Friday night. But you're 2 drinks into it. I never, ever, ever moderated my drinking. I don't think there was ever one night. It was like, I was always the last person. It became a running joke in New York where I would start saying to everybody at about 1 o'clock in the morning or midnight, I'm going to go home in 15 minutes because I have to work in the morning. And everyone would go, Ali, this is the same thing that happens every single night that you're out and you're always the last one here. So it kind of became a bit of a joke.
It's so true. And
moderation is something, again, that people underestimate the amount of mental capacity it takes up to moderate. You gave the perfect example where you said, I was drinking on Friday, but thinking about it on Monday. So you've had a whole week literally ruminating and thinking, well, what am I going to drink? How much am I going to drink? When am I going to call it a night? Blah, 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 blah. And you are just constantly thinking about it and you think you're doing good. But then what it also does is that when you don't do what you say you're going to do, that starts to chip away at your self-esteem, at your self-confidence. because you're not keeping promises to yourself. And that's actually more fatal than anything else, because you end up in that loop, as you say, where you think you can moderate, you try to moderate, you fail to moderate, then you go back to the beginning. Yes, I can moderate. And it is far more hard work, I personally think, than it is to just stop completely.
Yeah, it absolutely consumes all your energy. And I remember after I would drink, I would always wake up. I would always black out, by the way, always. Leaving bags and cards and jackets and all sorts of stuff in bars and nightclubs, and not even knowing which one I left something in. I mean, when I think back to it, the level of danger I put myself in on a consistent basis is off the wall. I think back now and I'm just so sad for that girl. I often think it is a miracle I'm here. It is an absolute miracle I'm alive. Really terrible things happened to me. The worst things that can happen to you happened to me. I got drugged and raped, not just once. Like terrible things happened. And even that wasn't enough to get me sober. It's like something really, truly, profoundly has to shift inside you. And it's funny because when I found out I was pregnant with my son, I had no problem not drinking, absolutely not. The whole way through my pregnancy, I breastfed him for 14 months, no problem. And I was like, I don't have a problem. It was clearly just, when I was partying in New York and I was really unhappy. And I was literally the healthiest I've ever been during my pregnancy. It was unbelievable. I was so healthy. But it was also interesting that it wasn't for me. It was for somebody else. It was for this baby that was growing inside of me. And as soon as he came out and I stopped breastfeeding, all those old familiar patterns came back, because it wasn't about him anymore. He was out of my body. And I realized that I never really cared about myself enough to care if someone said to me, I overdosed twice, was brought to hospital, was brought back to life once. I just didn't care about myself. There were times where I couldn't have cared less if something bad did happen. And that's multifaceted. That's a lot of childhood trauma, which really only came to light after I got sober. Years after I got sober, I got memories back from my childhood, which made my entire life make sense, by the way. Because when I was drinking and partying and blacking out, I was like, I don't understand why I'm doing this to myself. We're very clever as human beings. Our memories hide themselves for a good reason, so that we can survive and we can move forward with life. And I understand a lot more now. But I remember I went out one night. I was living with my mom when James was a baby. It was my friend's birthday. The usual. I planned to be home at midnight. I rocked in at 5 a.m. and I was throwing up, and she opened the bathroom door and just looked at me and she said, "Nice to see you've changed." And I just, still to this day, I felt that old familiar, the part of me that knew this when I was 14 or 15. But of course, and I just was like, how dare you? I haven't been out in years. This is my first night out. My body's not used to alcohol. Don't I deserve a night off? I'm a single mother. I threw it all out there. But really what was happening underneath was, oh, I absolutely do not have control over this. The fact that I can stay out till 5 a.m. when I know I have a baby at home, you have a problem. And it took a little while after that. So James is 14 now, so he's probably just turned 4. My mom, and you see, I had all these rules. I would never go out on a bender if James was at home. I would always only go on a bender if he was with my mom and staying overnight. So I justified. I was the queen of justification. So that means I'm a good person and I'm a good mom, right? Because I'm not drinking with him in the house. I'm not getting drunk while he's there. It means I'm a responsible alcoholic. In my head, I'm a really responsible alcoholic. So there you go. And I remember I woke up one morning and I was still in my clothes, lying face down on my bed, and I lived in this tiny cottage. My front door was open. And I did the thing I always do. I picked up my phone thinking, where was I? Waiting for someone to text me, waiting to find out where I was. My mom came around, took one look at me and said, "You're not getting him back today. I'm keeping him until you've got your shit together," basically. And the level of shame, oh, like you feel so dirty and gross and shameful and yucky. And I was so sick of that feeling after being out on a night out. And then I got a message on Facebook from some guy who said to me, I found you outside a nightclub last night, managed to get your address out of you and took you home. Are you okay?
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God, anything could have happened to me. And I'm all my child has. His dad's not in the picture. He just has me. He did not ask to be born into this. I got on my knees that day. And I've prayed before, but not like this. And I said, okay, God, I'll do anything. If you can help me get sober. I spent years in AA, never really wanting to get sober. Part of me did if something really, really dark had happened, but I didn't really. I wasn't ready to let go. And I was like, if you can help me get sober every single day that I wake up on this planet, and I still get emotional when I say this, my first words will be, thank you. How can I serve? How can I serve? How can I show up today? I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't really understand that day what I was praying for. And I have never even wanted a drink since that day. And that was 10 years ago on March the 8th. And then that day, I also had Jason Vale's book beside my bed, Kick the Drink Easily, which I'd never opened. And I read it cover to cover in a couple of hours.
Gosh.
Before I got my son home, and actually never told my family or close friends that I was not going to drink. And that's the first time I had ever done that. And it was a few weeks in where people started to notice, so you're not having a drink, you're not doing this, because I wasn't surrounded by the most supportive people. I kind of had that realization. If I had said it to those closest to me, they'd go, oh yeah, right, we'll see how long this lasts. Or, oh yeah, the other times you said you stopped drinking. That doesn't mean my family didn't love me or care about me. Every family has their issues. It's just like, I don't come from a particularly deeply supportive, nurturing, amazingly collaboratively supportive environment. I come from an environment where my mom kind of pitched us against each other from birth. And it didn't feel safe anyway to let those people in at that level. It didn't feel safe for me to say to people. And also, I didn't tell anybody what had happened because I felt so full of shame. And I didn't want to tell anybody what had happened. I didn't want somebody saying to me, why did you stop? Because I wasn't ready to tell the story, because I felt so full of shame. I could barely hold it in my body. Every time I thought about it, I just wanted to throw up. I was just like, oh my God, because when you don't remember anything, it's really scary.
Yeah.
When you don't remember stuff, so scary. And we normalize it. I used to sit around with my friends and talk, oh, I don't remember that. Oh, you don't remember doing this. And we joke about being blacked out. It's kind of wild. Like, I feel like I was living in some kind of weird dream for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that all that happened to you. But I'm just amazed that with that one shift and that prayer, you then just stopped and you've not gone back to it since. So what do you think changed, and what's happened obviously over the past 10 years that's kept you on that path? Because as you say, you stopped for your son because you had to, but then you went back to it, but something fundamentally shifted, or do you think it was just a God thing?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think I absolutely handed it over to God and went, help me. And sometimes we pray, but do we pray sincerely? And I don't think most of my prayers before had ever been sincere. And I was really sincere. I wake up every single day, and that is the first words that come out of my mouth is thank you. I write in my gratitude journal and I say, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? And use me today for the highest good of myself and every human being I come in contact with. And it's a very, very, very different way to live. I also think that I had had enough of my own shit. I was exhausted by my own crap. I was exhausted by the lies, by the stories, and I was exhausted by that way of living. It was Groundhog Day. And I had been meditating long enough and had a glimpse into the world of health and well-being that I also knew that there was a different way to live. There was a different way to be, that there was a different life out there beyond escaping every 5 minutes. And I had spent years in the run up to that moment doing work on myself. And actually, I look at addiction and recovery very different to most people. When people come to work with me, I don't get them to let go of the drink straight away. I say the drink will fall away when you do the work. And because most people who have a problem with alcohol aren't what traditionally people think of as alcoholics, people who drink all day, people who don't have any control over their life. Most people who have a problem with addiction are highly functioning and have the appearance of having their shit together. So I find when I work with people and they do the deep work, the things that they're using to numb out and to self-medicate fall away.
Yeah.
It's approaching it from the other way around.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I work with grey area drinkers, so it's a similar thing, and that's a spectrum, right? So 80% of drinkers are grey area drinkers. And it's really, if you think alcohol is affecting you in some way, physically, emotionally, spiritually, or mentally, then let's do something about it. But you're right, it's a process, and there's a lot of inner work, because it's not the drink itself that we want, it's the feeling we're trying to create or the feeling we're trying to escape from. And I do feel that if you can get to that underlying root cause and find tools, and I help people create alcohol-free toolkits and just really understand themselves better, get better at managing their emotions without having to reach for some sort of substance, it helps you to start understanding what's going on and why you are the way you are as well, and so, or what's led to that point. And so absolutely agree with that. I'm really curious though, because you said that you still do that to this day. So for 10 years, you've been saying thank you and how can I serve and what will you have me do? And I love that. I love that phrase. And I think everyone should do that every morning. But what's kept you on that path, do you think? What's kept you going?
Oh, the freedom from alcohol and the knowing. Well, first of all, I had to learn to feel. That's the biggest part of the entire thing. Most human beings on this planet right now are afraid of feeling. And so we can't have joy and happiness without experiencing the contrast and the opposite, which is the darker emotions. And so I realized very early on, what is the message I got from 14? I went to the doctor. I was feeling sad and potentially angry or different emotions. And nobody asked me about those emotions. I just got the message that I had to get rid of them, that I couldn't have those emotions. So if you can't get rid of them, which you clearly can't because there's something wrong with you, well, then we have to medicate them away. We actually are in the business of pathologizing human beings. It's wild. I have a huge problem with the mental health space because you're actually pathologizing somebody feeling, which is mad. And so you're telling people 50% of you is not okay. So you've got to just ignore 50% of who you are and only the good feeling parts of you and the part of you that's successful and happy and doing well. That's valid. That's acceptable. We'll have that in society. But the other parts, no, we got to get rid of that. And so I started to understand that in order for me to heal, I had to feel. And that was the first step. And I had been doing that in the years running up to that night that happened. And so for me, it was like, I now know that I have to do this inner work. It is an inside out world. I am the creator of this, and I have to go in and I have to be okay with being uncomfortable. And to this day, that I'm doing that work. The work is never done. I mean, for me, it's just we're peeling layers off an onion. And to be able to feel everything, to me, is now a gift because it means I'm alive. Whereas before, I literally numbed out everything. But I also like physically ran away from my life. I would like to say that I was really good at this. So broke up with my boyfriend in London and actually went to New York instead of dealing with it. I would move cities and countries and continents to avoid myself And then if I was unhappy in New York, I would go to Miami for a few weeks, thinking that that was going to make it better. And then wondering why the same problems were coming up in Miami that were coming up in New York, because you're always with you. It's not the place, it's what's happening inside of you that's the problem. And so for me, I think we live in a world where the greatest gift that we can give ourselves is the courage to feel our emotions, the courage to feel our way through life. And so, even in the darkest moments that I have had, I have learned to turn towards those parts of me and love them, which has been really hard. I had suicidal ideation from about 7 years of age. I never wanted to be here. And it wasn't until I had an amazing coach and mentor, and she invited me. She was super brave, really brave. Like, and I think there's a lot of people working in the mental health space who are afraid of people and who are afraid of really being honest with people. And I'm not pointing fingers or blaming them, because they do have a whole system that'll come down on them if they do anything wrong. There's a reason why they're afraid.
Yeah.
But we're afraid of mental illness. We're afraid of anything to do with mental health. I observe it in people, and I observe it in people who work in the mental health space. We're afraid to be really goddamn honest with people. And I had a mentor who, when I said to her I didn't want to be here and I wanted to organize everything and I wanted to leave, and she said to me, okay, I understand that. I actually get why you want to leave. If I'd been through what you've been through, if I'd gotten the memories back that you did, I would want to leave too. And I just remember taking this big deep breath and going, instead of being constantly surrounded by people like, you're so selfish, what are you doing? You can't do this, stop being anxious, blah, blah, blah. And she said, just do me a favor. Will you just stay till tomorrow? Yeah, okay, I can do that. And she goes, and now what I want you to do, because you're going anyway, right? I want you to turn towards the part of you that wants to leave. And I want you to ask it, why? And I'd never done that before. And it was like, well, because, all the reasons why, because it'd be easier for everybody else, it'd be easier on you. And then you dive deeper and deeper. And it's because the pain is too much here, and the pain will be gone. Bingo. There you have it. Because I just can't cope with this pain. And she said, I want you to turn towards that part of you. And I want you to tell that part of you that I love you. And I want you to thank that part of you. Like, just say, thank you. Thank you so much for having my back my whole life since I was 7. Thank you so much for being there for me. Thank you so much for stepping in when the pain got too much, too intense. And we did this work for a couple of hours, and I have never, ever wanted to check out again.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's an incredible
Never.
story.
And I'm like, those parts of me that were never trying to harm me, they were always trying to help me. When I started to turn towards them and love them and integrate them and understand that they're a part of me, and they're just as important as the part of me that feels joy and happiness. And I practice that to this day with myself and my clients. If a part of me is scared, I turn towards it and I thank it, and I ask questions and I become curious. And I think that is the gift that sobriety has given me. And it's the work just begins when you remove alcohol and drugs. That's the very beginning of the work, because that's when you have to start being in your life as opposed to escaping your life. But there's no greater gift than actually being in your own life.
Yeah,
as it's
absolutely.
unfolding. It's painful and messy, but that's part of being a human being.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing so vulnerably and openly. But it is incredible. We all think that the only emotions that we should feel are positive ones. And again, that's why we turn to substances, because we think, I want to numb out those painful emotions. I want them to go. But what we're also doing is we're numbing out the positive emotions, and we're getting into that habit that you just can't feel, that you don't want to feel. And emotions are actually just thoughts as well. And so again, being able to think, I can control my thoughts, I can think slightly differently and everything else, and change the way that I think. but being able to sit in those emotions and let them wash over you and be comfortable with that actually doesn't take very long at all. But it
Yeah.
feels like it's the longest thing ever, and you want it to go away straight away. And that's why you pick up a drink or you pick something up, because you think that's going to help me just get rid of it now. But literally, if you can sit in it for a minute and a half, it passes. And it's learning how to do that and learning how to be comfortable with that. But also, as you say, allowing yourself to feel everything. As humans, we've been designed with emotions. So that's what we are. We are emotional beings. And it's a blessing, I think. I know a lot of people see it as curses, but it is a blessing that you can feel all these emotions. You can go through all these things over the course of your life. But it's how you then deal with it, how you manage it. So I'd love to touch on some of the work that you do with your clients, because we've talked about the breath work and the meditation and the parts integration and everything else. But how did you get into it, and what are you doing today?
Yeah, Gavin, I started meditation. There was no apps, websites, anything. Like, it didn't exist. I was actually one of the first people to teach meditation online and won an award for innovating in that area. And
Amazing.
it was interesting because meditation can be used in today's world as a tool to make you happier. And I always say to people, that's not what meditation is for. That can be a side effect. You can absolutely begin to feel a little bit more happiness and peace, but meditation is a tool for awareness. There's no hack, there's no shortcut to to getting to know yourself. And the three S's are stillness, space, and silence. And they will always be your greatest teachers, above and beyond any guru or book or teacher or anything out there, because you are actually your greatest teacher. But we sit in meditation so that we can get to know ourselves and to observe things as they are. Not how we want them to be, not how we would love them to be, just things as they are. And that's the beginning of the emotional work. And I'm an energy coach, and emotions are just energy in motion. And I do keynote talks all over the world, and I do corporate work, and I teach people to manage their own energy, thinking about it in the form of currency. How do you spend, save, and invest your energy every day? If you weren't making any money and you went to the ATM and there was no money in your bank account, would you be surprised? Or would it be like, well, actually, I haven't worked and I haven't put any money into the bank, so the bank's not going to give me any money back? I mean, that's common sense. So I always find it interesting that we are shocked when we're exhausted and burnt out. And at 5 in the evening, we've no energy left. And it's like, have you put anything into your bank account of energy today at all? And a lot of people are like, oh, actually, no, I'm just constantly giving, but for the wrong reasons. I'm constantly depleting my energy, and I'm just spending, and then also getting into debt. And when I was young, I never invested in myself. I never took care of myself. And when you're young, you can get away with it. You can get away with existing on your central nervous system that's wired for decades, actually, especially if you're a type A person, until the day you can't, until the day that your body says, no more. And that's why sometimes I have CEOs that come to me and say, I don't understand. I've built 3 businesses and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, you've built it all on your nervous energy. You're push, 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 push. And now your being is like, I don't have anything left to give you. I'm burnt out. It's like having your foot on the gas and the brake pedal at the same time in the car. You're going to burn the engine, you know? So I love teaching people deep transformational breath work, simple techniques that in under 5 minutes a day can help you build that relationship with yourself. And if you do feel overwhelmed with your emotions, there's tools that you can use, like your breath, that's free and available all the time. It's the most underutilized resource we have. So I teach people how to get to know themselves, because the relationship that you have with yourself is the only one you have from birth till death. The only one. All your other relationships in your life will come and go, including if you're a parent and you rear your kids, you know, like they're going to grow up and they're going to go on to have their own life. And somebody said to me last week, which is really interesting on social media, you need to stop teaching people that they have to love themselves before they can call in a relationship. I always think it's really interesting how people make your words up that you never said. And I'm going, That's really interesting because I've never said that in my entire life, but it does bring up something that I would love to answer, right?
Mm.
Because people can absolutely love you if you don't love yourself. Of course they can. How many people don't love themselves that are surrounded by people they love?
Yeah.
Here's the catch. You can only give people what you give to you. You can only love others as deep as you love yourself.
Mm.
And that's why we do the work.
Mm.
We do the work so that we can learn to love all of who we are, so that we can then pass that on, get every single person that crosses your path when you love yourself and you do the work benefits. That's how we
Yeah.
change the world. That's how everything gets changed. And
Mm.
so when we learn to love ourselves, we have to learn to love all of who we are because we're all everything. We're light and dark. And so that's why I always say the work that we do in ourselves benefits every single human being on this planet right now. And if you want to stop the war on the planet, stop the war within first.
Mm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's so important, but it's so challenging for people as well. Especially, I would say, people that have been drinking and then suddenly stop because they realize that they don't love themselves. And so it is that journey to just start small step by small step to start thinking about, well, how can I start to love myself? What does that even mean to me? And as you say, it's generally about I'm giving to others, I'm loving others, I'm doing the things, but I haven't ever taken that time or space, silence, stillness, or space, as you say, to step back and say, well, what am I doing for me, and how do I start to love myself? And so the work you do is very powerful. And I challenge a lot of people, and whoever's listening, to say, do I love myself? And if why not? And if not, what's the first step you can take towards it? So maybe what are 2 or 3 things you would encourage someone to do?
Well, gratitude is still one of the greatest practices that transformed my life. I started keeping a gratitude journal because of a woman who I was working with when I had postnatal depression and I wasn't even allowed to be on my own with James. And she said to me, start writing down 3 things that you're doing every day. And I was like what? And she's like, well, I woke up. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really happy about that. And like I say that to people now, and I'm like, when you are that low, that's not actually a great thing. And I remember she was like, well, I want you to write down if you changed the baby's nappy, if you went for a walk, if you showered, right? Really small things. And she would ring me every day and I would write down 3 things. And over the space of a few weeks and a few months, I kept just writing 3 things. I didn't go past the 3 things. And I started to feel better. And then I would notice that other different things will come up. And I would I realized I had spent my entire life focusing on what I was not doing, focusing on lack, focusing on scarcity, focusing on what's missing, focusing on what I didn't have. And I kept it really simple. I cooked the baby dinner today. I went for lunch. I was playing in the garden with him. And there is in this cupboard like piles of gratitude journals.
Yeah.
And every single day since then, and that's 14 years, I get up and I write. And I have my own journal that's just 5 minutes a day, 3 things you're grateful for, your intention for the day, and 3 action steps. Now, when I was doing all this work 14 years ago, it was before I went to UCLA and studied the mindfulness neuroscience aspect of it. I had no idea why these practices work. But I would say gratitude, if there is a hack, is the greatest one there is out there because gratitude lives in the frequency of harmony and peace and abundance. And it helps to train your reticular activating system in your brain, your RAS, which is the gatekeeper of your mind, which determines what information comes in from the outside world. And it helps you to focus on what's good. And then you're telling your brain, these kind of experiences are important to me. And your reticular activating system will actually go and actively seek out good feeling experiences into the world. So that to me is the greatest thing you can do. But I always say to people, that sweet spot when you wake up in the morning, just as you're waking up, and then just as you're falling asleep, are the 2 most important times of the day. Because you're in a different brainwave state called theta. and you're incredibly impressionable. And if you're like me and ADD and all of that stuff, as soon as my eyes open in the morning, my brain goes to worry. It's who I am, it's how I am. But just because it's who I am and how I am doesn't mean that I don't work with it. So the first thing I do is place my hand to my heart in the morning and say, today's a great day. Everything is always working out for me. So I interrupt that as soon as my eyes open. I don't give myself even the tiniest window of opportunity to go into the to-do list and worry and everything. And the number 3 thing I would say, get your phone out of your bedroom. I say to every single person.
I do. I say the same thing. Yeah.
It's the easiest habit because you're not on your phone when you're sleeping. Now, listen, I understand the first time I plugged my phone in outside my bedroom, I actually was going, good night now. I'll be back tomorrow. Don't worry. I was like, this is wild. I'm actually treating my phone like a person. And because I'm naturally prone to anxiety and stimulation and overwhelm and everything, I turn off my Wi-Fi at night and I leave my phone out of my bedroom. And then lots of people say to me, it's my alarm clock, it's this, blah, blah, blah. I've heard every excuse in the book. And I say, put it in the hall outside. So put it on loud. It also gets me up. So my alarm goes off. So I have to get out of bed to go out, get my phone and turn off the alarm. So it serves a couple of purposes. I sleep better. Sleep is really important. Your nervous system is not wired. You're getting a little bit of a break. There are so many benefits from that one practice, and it's the easiest because you're asleep. So there would be the 3 things. Those 3 things alone, if you did those for 30 days, you will start noticing an enormous difference in your energy. Because let's face it, if you sleep, your blood sugar is going to be more regulated. Your decision-making process is going to be easier. Like everything changes from a good night's sleep. Everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So many nuggets there, Alison. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you think we haven't covered that you'd love to cover?
I will say one thing to everybody. If there's somebody out there listening to this and they're thinking, I can't do it, I'm going to say to you, you can. I'm the person who people look to now that I was just in Miami and I met people that I haven't seen in 20 years. And the number one thing that's always said to me is, if you can get sober, anyone can. So I used to look at that as an insult. Now I take it as an incredible compliment and a huge achievement.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is, I always say to people who are nervous about letting go of alcohol, I have never, ever, ever in my entire life, and I've been in rooms of thousands of people, even government rooms, teaching people about alcohol. I've never, ever had one person say, I really regret letting go of alcohol. I've never heard it to this day.
I haven't
What
heard
I have heard is, I really regret going out last night. I really regret going on the piss. I really regret this. There is nothing to lose and everything to gain. Everything.
Yeah.
Is it scary? Absolutely. But it's even scarier to stay where you are.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. You're so right. Well, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest. How can people find you?
My website, AlisonCanavan.com. I'm on Instagram as well, Alison Canavan Wellness. I send out free daily affirmations. You can download my journal for free. I have a membership where there's 65 hours of content with deep transformational breathwork, meditations and workshops, and lots of things and work for people to move through. But I want to thank you as well for the work that you're doing, because these conversations are so important. And 10 years ago when I got sober, this wasn't even available and didn't exist. And it's so beautiful to see people like you bringing this work into the world. And I want to thank you for that, because it's incredible.
Bless you. Thank you so much. Well, I never end a podcast episode without asking my favorite question, and you've hinted to it throughout, but what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you, Alison?
Freedom.
Yeah. It's the number one answer.
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, freedom. I'm free. Like everything, even when I smoked, or I was totally addicted to coffee as well, the freedom of not having anything have a hold over you. There's no feeling better than not being beholden. Even when I used to smoke, I remember in New York, they stopped us smoking in buildings, and my entire day would be obsessed with when is there a break so I can go down for a cigarette. So for me,
Yeah.
the addiction that we let go of brings the gift of freedom. There's no greater gift in life than freedom.
Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. I love it. So thank you. Well, thank you for being an incredible guest. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you for sharing your story just so amazingly. And I want people to get in touch with you and sign up to what you've got. And your journal sounds amazing. So everyone go and get the journal. Okay. Well, thank you again.
So much. Big
Take
hug.
care. Thank you. Well, thank you, Alison. I really enjoyed that conversation, and I loved your answer about thriving alcohol-free and that being freedom. And freedom seems to be a popular answer with a number of my guests. I wanted to highlight to you the free masterclass that I am running next Wednesday, the 26th of March, and I can't wait to see you there. It's going to be the most incredible masterclass. So if you have spent years trying to prove yourself, feeling like things are just not enough and where you are is just not enough, you've worked really hard, you've checked all those boxes, you've done everything right, but you're still waiting for someone to tell you you're ready or you're good enough or you can go for it, you're still wanting that permission. Well, the truth is, no one is coming to give you that permission, and you don't need it. You absolutely don't need it. You've worked too hard to still be proving yourself. So it's time to start trusting yourself. It's time to really step up and lead without over-explaining, without over-proving, or without overthinking. And that's what this masterclass is going to cover. It's a free masterclass called How to Break Up with Decades of Chasing External Validation and the 3 Ways to Become the Powerful Leader You Were Meant to Be. So if you are an ambitious woman ready to own your own success and lead boldly and stop playing small, I really encourage you to join this masterclass. This is your moment. Join the masterclass. I'll put all the details below, and I can't wait to see you there. If you can't make it live, there's going to be a recording, and there's going to be an amazing exclusive offer for you in that masterclass and a bonus that you will get. So I encourage you to join it, and I can't wait to see you there. Okay, well, I hope this episode has inspired you, has given you some food for thought, and has encouraged you to really think about not only the stopping drinking, but the what next and how life could be so different. And what Alison said about she hasn't met anybody who has gone on this path who regrets it, but she's met so many people who haven't, who are regretting various things and feeling that guilt and shame. And so if you're ready to take that break from alcohol, I do encourage you to do so. I encourage you to reach out and let's have a chat, because even just giving yourself permission to take a short break makes all the difference. So I hope that's inspired you. I hope it's helped you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have the most wonderful week. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my signature Thrive Alcohol Free Society group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.